to introduce Bshara Nassar, founder and director of the Museum of the Palestinian People. We met a few years ago. I was doing some fundraising for Bethlehem University, where he's a graduate. His family's from Palestine. And the next time any of you are in Israel or Palestine, I recommend you get off the tourist track and visit somewhere like Hebron to see what's really going on. You've all read his bio. Welcome, Bshara.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. It's really an honor and pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I am going to talk a little bit about myself and how I grew up and where did I grow up, and then I'm going to be talking about the museum. So it is. So yeah, a little bit about myself. I was born in Jerusalem. And I grew up in Bethlehem, not too far from where Jesus was born in the Nativity Church. I wanted to show you some of the pictures from Bethlehem growing up. I used to love playing soccer, and as you see, we didn't have playgrounds. It's just kind of a mud kind of playground. This is not me, but this is just a picture of school of kids going to school, and of course, everyone here knows Bethlehem. This is, if you can see my pointer, this is the Nativity Church where Jesus was born, and in every December, this picture was taken a few years ago on December 25th, where Christian and Muslims in Bethlehem celebrate Christmas, right? The place birth of Jesus. This is a full day celebration where we have a lot of scouts, marching scouts, and fireworks and bands and worship, especially for Christians, right? At the same time, this is another picture of Bethlehem. So you can see the beauty in this picture, and the people are happy and they're having great time. But then, boom, this is a picture of Bethlehem where it's surrounded by walls. As you see, this is a marathon that's been done in Bethlehem every year, where people cannot actually cross the checkpoints or cross the walls to go to another city or Jerusalem, but they're going into circles. So as you see also the checkpoints, this is a worker going to their work at 5 a.m. in the morning. It's the cars. Growing up, even though as I said, I was born in Jerusalem, I didn't have the freedom as a Palestinian to go to Jerusalem, right? It's this is just wanted to show you some. This is the wall that's separating in fact taking lands from the nearby Palestinian. As you see, this is one of the houses that has land that belongs to it, and as you see, the wall is cutting the farm from the houses. Another, Merry Christmas from the Bethlehem ghetto, right? People expressing themselves, Palestinians expressing themselves and writing things on the wall, whether it's artistics or messages to get the word attention, right? This is actually my cousin here. She's Palestinian American, and she went to Palestine. We went to Palestine a few years ago, and she said, even the smallest person can change the future. Very powerful messages on these walls, from artistic to, I see Sterling is nodding. I think he get the message of art, for being an artist, right? This is my family farm. I wanted just to little bit talk about it. In addition to growing up in Bethlehem, the city, as I showed you, I also grew up on a farm that's my great grandfather got or bought in 1916. Now, during that time in 1916, which was the Ottoman Empire controlling the Middle East and specifically Palestine, people used to sell lands in a handshake, right? But my great grandfather was able to get papers to prove the ownership of the land, and that helped us in keeping the land until today, because in 1991, I'm not sure if many of you is familiar with the conflict where Israel was created in 1948, and the West Bank was occupied completely in 1967. So Israel basically at this point control all the land, all the historical land of Palestine, what we call as Palestinian, the historical land of Palestine. And in 1991, the Israeli government declared our land as a state land. The state land means it belongs to the Israeli government. So for the purpose of building settlements, another concept that maybe some of you have heard about, that the settlements right now, there is 5 settlements. This is only Israeli Jewish settlements that surrounding the farm. As you see around there, I don't think it's clearly, but you can see some of that. This is and in that spirit, my family coming from a Christian family that believe really in Jesus' values and the Christian values, right? We wanted to keep the land and to invite other people from all over the world to keep to first to be in solidarity with the farm and with the family, to learn about the situation on the ground, but also to join us into this creative nonviolent resistance, whether it's through bringing people together under this message that we refuse to be enemies. So this is like that peace building project that's on the farm. As you see, this is in different languages. You have Hebrew and English. This is actually one of the ugly things that my family is went through is to be trees. Some of the trees were burned by the Israeli settlers. We're constantly harassed, even though we're trying to bring people together, and Palestinians, Israelis, and internationals. We continued being harassed by the nearby settlers with the purpose of leaving the farm. So this is just a little bit about my background. I want to take maybe the next few minutes to talk about what made me create the museum. And as you see, this is, I came from this background. I was inspired by my family's story of, nonviolent resistance and, bringing people together and peace building. That was my biggest inspiration. So when I came to Washington, D.C. in 2011, and as a tourist, I came to DC. I visited many museums, monuments, memorials. As you know, Washington DC is the city of Smithsonians, and I was really impressed. I mean, going to the African American Museum, going to the Native American Museum, going to the Holocaust Museum. At the same time, I couldn't find a place to tell my story as Palestinian. Right, and as a Palestinian living in the U.S., as a Palestinian American now, we continue to see our story that being distorted. Right, we go to the news and we see Palestinians in a news item, in a flash, like, oh, look at the Palestinians, they're victims. Look what's happening to them, or look at Palestinians, they're violent. And so, we wanted to create something that first show Palestinians as human beings, show Palestinians as people with rich culture that goes back to thousands of years. I mean, if you go back to history, you can see the Palestinian people are a mix of people that immigrated to Palestine for thousands of years. That these cultures have kind of melted together, created the Palestinian people. We have rich history. We have rich culture. We are not invented people. That we were not invented in 1948. And we also wanted to, through the museum, in addition to history and culture, show that Palestinian Americans are part of the, let's call it the American dream, right? We have people in politics. We right now have, I think, 2 members of Congress who are Palestinian Americans. We have people in Hollywood. Mainly, maybe you can recognize Gigi Hadid and DJ Khaled, very famous people. We have people in medicine. We have people in all aspects of society that we wanted to highlight through the museum and through that connection with the American people. I just wanted to show some of the activities we did. This is, part of our team that we started. Just a little bit about how this started. We started, as I said, 2011. I came to Washington, D.C. So I've been in the U.S. for over 10 years. I went to grad school, and then after grad school, I studied conflict transformation. That was my master's degree. And then I started putting together the board, the board of director of the museum, forming 501c3, and also getting an exhibit that worked with artists from Palestine around the United States. That started in 2015 in Washington, D.C., and slowly travel around the country for 3 years. And eventually we a family who's actually not Palestinian, a non-Palestinian family in Washington, D.C. They heard about us. They heard that we are doing this effort to tell the story, to share the story that's not being told in the United States. And they said, we would like to offer you this building free of rent for a couple of years, right? So we started 2018. As you see from the images, we renovated the building. It was a little bit run down. We had to raise funds, renovate the building. This is actually part of the reception that we opened the museum with. Some of the artifacts that we had a National Geographic magazine that goes back to 1914. Some old Palestinian passport, as you see, from 1942. And all of these artifacts were donated by mostly Palestinian Americans who live in the US, and some or non-Palestinians who also care and wanted to see that the story is being told. So we were able to open the museum in 2019. Since 2019 until today, we had around 10,000 visitors, even though with the pandemic that kind of hurt the museum. We were able, but through that, we were able to launch a virtual museum where you can check it online. This is just an image from the grand opening. Some of the museum. Okay, so in terms of in the last couple of years, we had, as I said, during COVID, we launched a virtual museum. Since 2019, I guess since 2015, we had over 100 events that educate people about Palestine, share the culture, cooking classes, concerts, different things. Right now, we have 30 volunteers that volunteer on a regular basis. We have tours, that's guided tours every Saturday from 12 to 6, where you can come and have a Palestinian American tour guide that takes you on a tour, sharing their story, sharing about the museum, sharing the artifacts. But most importantly, we want people to get to know us, right? We want people to get to know who are the Palestinians. We want people to talk to Palestinians, not just to see an artifact and artwork, but to interact with Palestinians, right? We have these are some of the links that I just wanted to share with you before I open it for questions and Q&A. And we are really, having said that, we are really up to transform the view of the Palestinians in the world. That's our goal. The mission is, of course, to share culture and history, but we really want to see a world that's transformed in seeing Palestinians as equal partners, seeing Palestinians as people who, as I said, as human beings, right? As people who can have their own land, can have their rights. And eventually, we hope that the U.S. government specifically can be a part of a peaceful solution between Israelis and Palestinians based on equal rights, not even based on one state or two state solution, but based on equal rights, based on equality. Thank you all for listening, and I went through it very quick, but I would like to open it for discussion and questions.
And thank you for being here today and sharing about this wonderful facility that you've created in Washington, D.C. What better place to be than in the nation's capital? But looking at the long-term hostilities, and you're talking about history going back even before World War I and those areas. Of course, it goes back in time thousands of years. But what 2 or 3 very concrete things can we do to move the narrative and move the peace process forward? There's a lot of talk, lots of scholarly papers. People lament and they wring their hands. We've featured the Eco-Peace Middle East joining of the Palestinian, Israeli, and Jordanian schools for water harvesting and food security as an example. That's very concrete. The parents, the teachers have to work together across all 3 areas. So what 2 or 3 things do you see that's doable? And again, to move this narrative forward, something that's positive. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Of course, we are all here about positive. I just wanted to say one thing that on my heart, that many people in this country are always trying to create a balance, to say, oh, look at we need to tell the Palestinian story and the Israeli story. But I'm inviting, people who I talk to or come to the museum. I say we need to empower Palestinians to tell their story. We need to respect the Palestinian voice. Like we are the same thing, we're respecting the Ukrainian voice. Right now, we are seeing some what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, right? Where the whole world is boycotting Ukraine. The whole world is not Ukraine, Russia, where the whole world is condemning Russia. At the same time, the world is not condemning Israel, where to me it's the same situation. Another country or another people is occupying another people, getting them into very terrible situation. So what concrete? I mean, for that's the thing, is that one of the things is to give Palestinians their voice, to give Palestinian freedom to share their story. So are you asking on the political level or like the museum level?
No, I'm staying away from the politics, because then you're back in the quagmire. What 2 or 3 very concrete things beyond even the museum, or the museum is one of those? But what other things can we be doing that we can move this narrative forward? Because it's been stuck. It's on replay continuously. It's like Groundhog Day all over again, but for 100 years or 1,000 years. How do we break that cycle? Okay.
That's the first thing, is to have Palestinians share their stories. I think that's important. For me, as I said, I don't see people like this is not an equal conflict. There's an oppressed and there's an oppressor, And so in terms of the museum, visit the museum, learn, educate, like education is really important. So I don't know if I would think about concrete steps, but it's for me, it's like visiting the museum, learning about Palestine, and hearing the Palestinian voice is really one of it's a big step forward.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, and thank you for sharing that.
Very interesting presentation, Zara. Quite frankly, I don't understand the basic issues that need to be resolved so that there is no oppression, so there is peace in the area. And in the media in the United States, we have seen a lot about the various leaders of the Palestinian movement, and they didn't seem willing to enter into serious discussions with the Israelis. And I really don't know if that's true or not. I'd like to hear what your views are.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, I want to maybe give an example of why. Yes, there is a truth to what you're saying in terms of, first, I think for bigger understanding of the issues, and that started with the displacement of Palestinians in 1948, right? When Israel was created, 700,000 Palestinians became refugees, similar to what's happening in Ukraine right now, right? But and right now the Palestinian refugees are still refugees 70 years later, in Jordan, in Syria, in Lebanon, of course, in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Gaza. So I think I really want to invite you to come to the museum, because we talk about a lot of these issues. I don't think there's enough time to go deeper into the grievances of the Palestinian people, right? In terms of becoming refugees, or their land is being taken away, like my family farm. But to address your issue about Palestinian leaders not wanting to negotiate, there is a truth to that, of course. There has been negotiations, specifically Oslo in 1993. But in terms of negotiations, if I was the leader, Palestinian leader, in right now, I wanted to even be inclined to negotiate. Why? Because it's asymmetric power dynamic, right? So even if I want to ask for something, I'm not gonna get it, right? Why? Because I don't have any power, right? Like the Israeli government has all the power to make the decisions, to take the land. There's nothing that's on the table that we are offering as Palestinians, for them to change. There is no pressure from the international community like we're pressuring Russia, right? So there is no, this is not an equal negotiation. It's not an equal situation where one side has the power and one side has no power.
Okay, thank you for that. For time's sake, I'm going to read the rest of these questions. David Klaus says, do you see any hope for a two-state solution?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see any hope for two-state solution at this point. I think, I also don't want to say I'm for one state or two states, right? But I'm for equal rights. So that's whether we have one state or two states. I think it's important that Palestinians have equal access to water, equal access to electricity, to basic resources, to economy. That we have access to the legal system, where we can have where we can have our land. We can have sovereignty over our private lands and properties.
Okay, thank you. Bill and May also want to know where the museum will be located. And Bill is wondering if you could tell us where the largest Palestinian American communities are in the United States.
So yes, thank you. The museum is located on 1900 18th Street. It is 18th and T. It's near DuPont Circle. It's open. It has been open since 2019, and we are right now open for tours on Saturdays from 12 to 6. And soon, in the next month, we're going to be open also on Friday. So we would love to have you. In terms of where are the biggest Palestinian community, there are different pockets of Palestinian communities. There is a big Palestinian community in Northern Virginia, and there is in Chicago, there is in Ohio, and there is in Southern California.
Okay, and Armenia asks, do you have a map of 1948 and today of Palestine and Israel territory to show us at the museum when we go?
Oh, in the museum. Yes, of course. We have several maps that...
Well, if you can show now, I have it. Okay.
Yes.
So you can see Israel was here in 1948, and Palestine was green, and you can see today is that.
So Palestine, historical Palestine was that's the first one on the left.
The green one was Palestine.
Yeah, and Israel didn't exist. It was like, this is of course, yeah. There was a lot of Jewish immigration to historical Palestine throughout it started in 1980. Of course, Christian, Muslim, and Jews used to be in Palestine historically. I mean, for thousands of years, of course. But back in 1916, Jews were 5%. The rest were Christians and Muslims. And with the Jewish immigration going to Palestine, and of course after the Holocaust, that kind of propelled with the promise of many European countries to create a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. And based on that, there was militias and that Jewish militias that started to expel Palestinians in 1946, 1947 from Palestine. And as a result of that, 700,000 Palestinian refugees were kicked out of their homes, destroyed, their lands were taken, their homes were taken. And that continued until today. And I mean, you can see now, this is Israel. This is as of today, and there is no Palestine. This is the West Bank, and this is Gaza. So practically, we are not talking about Palestine. We're talking about, I mean, Palestine doesn't exist right now. It's not a real country. It's just the West Bank, and you can see the West Bank. There is a lot of it's. Between the West Bank, there's these areas which is also Israeli settlements, and then the Gaza, which is surrounded. There's a siege on Gaza since 2000, and people cannot get in and out since then. And that one last thing, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch declared Israel as an apartheid state. This is not what I'm saying. This is the Amnesty International recent report, declaring Israel as an apartheid state, based on the treatment of Palestinians from the date of its creation.
Okay, Bshara, thank you very much for your presentation and that perspective on the difficult situation for the Palestinian people. Many of us will make a point to visit your museum in the near future. One more
Absolutely.
museum in Washington that I haven't visited that I should visit. And congratulate you for your good work in putting that together.
Thank you.
We
Thank
have
you,
a
Ken.
tradition as a club of honoring each of our speakers with the planting of a tree. And if we had an in-person meeting, I would be handing you a tree certificate pledging to do so. We will be doing a spring tree planting with the National Park Service, our partner in our program, which is called Trees for the Capital. And I want to thank our current chair, Brian Ingram, and co-chair, Dr. Sam Hancock, in continuing that 30-year tradition we have. So we'll let you know when the tree planting ceremony will take place and invite you. And we'll actually be able to provide you with the GPS coordinates of your tree.
Oh, that's amazing. I would love to see the tree. It reminds me of my family farm.
Yes, and the tree will be planted. Some trees are near the tidal basin, cherry blossom trees. Others are indigenous trees, native trees planted in downtown parks to retree the downtown parks.